to open with a confession. And it's an awkward one for a show that's about to spend half an hour on a movie. Gregory, we are the wrong people to be doing this.
We are spectacularly the wrong people.
Neither of us watches films. I couldn't tell you what won at Cannes.
Could you even name the last Russian to win at Cannes? The Zvyagintsev one. Grand Prix, wasn't it? Probably.
If you asked me to name a living cinematographer, I would quietly change the subject.
You changed the subject to Russia.
I'd change the subject to Russia, because that's the only subject we actually have. So, disclaimer number 1. As film critics, we are, at our absolute best, enthusiastic amateurs.
Probably a good deal worse. Anyway, hi, I'm Gregory.
And I'm Dina. And today, for the first time on this show, we're reviewing a movie, which, as we've just established, we have no business doing.
But this one earns the exception. It was shot in secret, inside a Russian school, by a teacher with a camera, and it won an Oscar. That's why we're here.
And it's a film worth being precise about, starting with who actually made it. Because it was made by two men who, for almost the whole production, were never in the same country.
So, the film is called Mr. Nobody Against Putin, 2025. And one of the two men is the director, David Borenstein, an American based in Denmark. Before this, he was best known for a documentary about China's real estate bubble, all those half-built European cities standing empty in the Chinese countryside.
And for this one, he got nowhere near his subject.
Nowhere near it. He never set foot in Karabash. He wasn't the one in the room. He directed the whole thing from Denmark, remotely, over encrypted messages and an FTP server the BBC told them to use.
Which sounds absurd until you realize it's the only way it could have worked. A foreign director cannot walk into a school in the Urals and film the state indoctrinating children. He'd be arrested before lunch.
Exactly. So Borenstein's job became something stranger than directing. He took 2 years of footage shot by somebody else and built the film out of it, structured it, chose who to follow, and made the single biggest call in the whole project, that the man holding the camera should himself become the main character.
And that man is the other half. Pavel Talankin. And he's the reason the film exists at all. He wasn't a filmmaker. He was the events guy and the staff videographer at a school in Karabash, a poor copper-smelting town in the Urals. Everything you see, he shot. He narrates it. In the sense that matters, he is the film.
And give people the detail about his job, because it's lovely. And it also turns out to be the whole trick.
So, officially, he's the school's teacher organizer and videographer. In practice, that means he ran the assemblies, the concerts, the last bell ceremonies, and filmed all of them. He was the school's memory keeper. He even taught the kids to shoot and edit. Which means the one person the school had handed a camera to was the one person nobody thought twice about seeing with a camera.
The perfect cover was his actual job.
The perfect cover was his actual job. And here's a small thing I love. It was a family school for him. His own mother worked there, the librarian. He loved those kids, and the kids loved him.
And there's a genuinely cruel detail in how it got made. For long stretches, Talankin was filming with no proof the film even existed. For security, Borenstein couldn't send cuts back into Russia, so Talankin just kept shooting. On faith. An actor who wasn't allowed to see the movie he was starring in.
Only after he got out did the two of them sit down over a rough cut and finish it together. Which is an extraordinary act of trust in a stranger, over an encrypted line, with prison as the downside.
Now, the resume. It premiered at Sundance in January 2025, left with a special jury award, won a BAFTA, won Denmark's Robert, and then it took the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature.
And here's disclaimer number 2, and it's a matter of principle. We are not going to tell you whether it deserved the Oscar.
We can't.
To have an honest opinion on whether it was the best documentary of the year, we'd have had to watch every other film in the category.
And, in the spirit of total transparency, we could not be bothered.
So, was it Oscar-worthy? Is a question we're formally recusing ourselves from. Ask a real critic. What we can do is the only thing we do here. Talk about Russia.
Because this is only nominally a film about a school. It's really a film about how a state reaches down into the smallest, most ordinary room in the country, a classroom in a town most Russians couldn't find on a map, and rewrites what a child is allowed to think.
Which is the subject of our next big episode. So think of today as the trailer.
Okay. What is the film actually about? The story, without spoiling it. Because the premise is this ordinary, nice job that curdles.
Right. For years, Talankin's job is genuinely pleasant. Concerts, graduations, the cheerful little videos every Russian school now has to make and upload to a state portal to prove it's doing its patriotic duty. And then February 2022 happens, and the job changes underneath him.
And I want to be specific here, because the school got more patriotic undersells it. The assemblies acquire a script. The conversations about what matters lessons show up. The Monday flag raising. The anthem. History quietly rewritten. So an invasion becomes a rescue mission.
A rescue mission. Naturally.
And then it stops being slogans and gets physical. Basic military training comes back. The same drills the Soviets used to run. So the hallways fill with kids marching in formation, learning to strip and assemble a rifle, being taught how to throw a grenade most effectively.
And nobody in the room says out loud what most effectively means.
Nobody says it out loud. And at one point, actual Wagner mercenaries turn up to give the children lessons in courage and demonstrate explosives.
To teenagers.
To teenagers.
And the thing the film does that I think is its real achievement, it doesn't stop at the school gates. The whole town's been put on a war footing.
And on camera, what does that actually look like?
So the camera drifts out into Karabash, the pro-regime rallies, the recruiters, and the young men he knows, wondering out loud whether to sign a contract and go. Usually not out of conviction, but because the army pays better than anything else in a grim copper town.
And then the part that gives the film its grief.
The funerals. And the men coming home in coffins are not strangers. Talankin has worked at this one school long enough that some of the boys being buried are his own former pupils. Kids whose younger brothers and sisters are still sitting in his classroom. One of the dead is simply a classmate of his, someone he sat next to as a child.
The school and the town turn out to be one continuous machine. It processes children at one end, and a few years later, it mourns them at the other.
So what does Talankin do with all this? He thinks about quitting. Anyone sane thinks about quitting.
And instead, he does the opposite. He keeps the camera pointed, only now at everything, including the parts the state absolutely does not want on tape. In plain sight, under cover of the official videographer, everyone had learned to ignore. For the better part of 2 years. And then he leaves the country, with a hard drive that could not be allowed to stay in it.
And that's the setup, which brings us to the argument we've actually been wanting to have. Because before we tell you what we thought, we have to stop on the hardest question about this film. And this is where you and I don't agree, Gregory. Was it ethical to make at all?
Go on. I know you've got a case.
I do. Look, Talankin pointed a camera at children, at colleagues, at parents. People who were told, in effect, that they were being filmed for a report, a routine school video. They did not know they were being filmed for a movie that would go out to the whole world with the word Putin in the title. That's the core of it for me. There was no disclosed purpose.
And plenty of Russian critics
Have gone further. They accuse the filmmakers of cynicism, of turning people who never signed up for a political documentary into its cast, and putting Talankin's own colleagues and students at real risk. And I don't think that's hysterical.
It's not hysterical. But
Let me finish. Because the children are the part I can't get past. Their faces are now permanently out in the world, identifiable, potentially a meme. And the man behind the camera knew he could leave the country. They could not.
go on. I'm listening.
And by Talankin's own account, the FSB later went round to the school and told the principals not to even contact him. This person never existed. The people who stayed behind inherited the risk. And one of the film's own producers admitted there was, and I quote, no informed consent, no consent in any way, shape, or form.
All true. And good intentions don't dissolve the consent problem. But be precise about what the crime even is. The filming was legal. It was his job. Footage for the very state reports the school has to upload.
So the shoots themselves were above board.
Completely. Nobody broke a law being on camera. What changed is where that footage ended up. And around that, the film was built responsibly. The team stripped out anything that could put a subject in legal danger.
Wasn't that overcautious?
Overcautious? Not remotely. Their reasoning is chilling, precisely because it's so specific to Russian law. Talk to a foreign broadcaster. That's treason. That's prison. Make a joke. They take it seriously. That's prison. So they didn't allow anything even vaguely critical to stay in.
So the vetting is real. I'll grant you the vetting is real.
The vetting is the whole ballgame for me. The footage was combed so that nobody on screen could be handed a criminal charge for something they said. And here's my actual bottom line, Dina. There was no other way to make this film. You cannot document a state capturing its own children with a consent form.
See, that's the sentence I keep snagging on. There was no other way. Because it's true, and it's also exactly what everyone who has ever filmed people without asking has said. It's doing a lot of moral work, that sentence.
It is. But sometimes it's just true. Sometimes there really was no other way.
And maybe that's where we actually meet. I'm not saying the film shouldn't exist. I'm saying it shouldn't get to feel clean about how it exists. And Talankin took a real risk. He could have been exposed, and he's in exile now for it. But he chose it, and he could leave. The colleagues and students never chose it, and they can't.
That I'll sign. The ones who never agreed to any of it are the ones who can't get out. That asymmetry is real, and the film doesn't quite own it. Though here's the irony that's almost too good. The loudest demand for an ethics investigation into the film came from a Russian state human rights body, the same apparatus whose conversations about what matters the film is filming.
The propaganda machine, deeply concerned about consent. Wonderful.
Okay. Having had our fight, let's do the thing we agreed on. We both liked this film. A lot.
We did. Which, on this podcast, is practically a miracle.
And I want to start with the reason it matters. Because it's the reason I defend it to almost anyone. This film understands something a shocking number of people don't. That propaganda in a country like Russia isn't decoration. It's load-bearing. It's part of the machinery that keeps the regime standing up.
And the film catches it at the smallest possible scale. One classroom, one town. Which is exactly where it's least visible and most effective.
And I think it matters most for Western viewers. There's this reflex among thoughtful people in the West, be sharply, often fairly, critical of your own government. And then turn around and romanticize Russia as some misunderstood alternative. And this film is a bucket of cold water on that.
It is. Although, and this is me being me, the thing I loved most wasn't the argument. It was the kids.
Of course it was.
The kids are wonderful. Varied, funny, unguarded, dressed like the faintly alternative teenagers they actually are, showing real emotion. And all of it filmed with tenderness, not like sociological specimens. And the school is so recognizable, it hurt. Not the total ruin you'd brace for. There's a perfectly decent computer lab.
The computer lab almost redeems it.
But the surly women in the canteen? I can confirm from lived experience that those exact women staffed the exact same cafeteria decades ago. Some things in a Russian school are eternal.
For me, the other triumph is how it looks. Karabash is shot beautifully, and I mean that as high praise, even though almost nothing in the frame is pretty. The smelter, the permanent cold, the endless panel blocks. It's depressive and completely atmospheric at once.
It's a Russian post-punk album cover stretched to feature length.
It's a Russian post-punk album cover at 90 minutes. And the setting does an argument for you. It quietly shows that men here don't only sign contracts because propaganda got to them. Plenty sign because the alternative is a dead-end life in a poisoned town, where the army is, grotesquely, the best-paying employer for miles. Despair recruits as hard as ideology.
And the fourth thing, the one I didn't expect to be moved by, is Talankin's love for home. Not the state, the homeland, the specific people, the -40 winters, the concrete blocks. The film is soaked in that affection, and it's completely convincing.
And it never tips into sentimentality.
And it cuts against this discourse you hear constantly, that Russia's rotten all the way through. Everyone's guilty. Nobody's worth pitying. The film gently refuses that. It insists there are people here worth loving.
Which is a harder, braver thing to say than blanket condemnation. Agreed on all four. But there's a fifth thing we loved, and he deserves his own segment.
Oh, he does.
Quick breather before we get to the villain. We don't have sponsors. Turns out a podcast about Russian propaganda isn't a demographic advertisers fight over.
Their loss.
But we do have a Patreon. And it's where we put our special episodes, deep dives on the books and thinkers you actually need to understand the Russia we keep describing.
The ones who either built this regime or saw it coming. And a couple are already up. Vadim Tsimborsky, who back in 1993 wrote a paper that reads like a leaked memo from 2026.
And Yuri Mamleev, underground Moscow novelist, the warmest man in the room, and the author of the most horrifying prose in the language.
But the new one, the one that just dropped?
This is the good part. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Just out, on the Patreon, right now. 1994, the most famous dissident alive, comes home from exile, not by plane, but by train. 2 months, coast to coast across Russia, lecturing the whole country off a railway platform.
The man who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, Russia's conscience, returning to its body.
And here's the twist we build the episode on. He didn't just expose the old regime. He predicted the collapse of this one, then watched Putin adopt his ideas on his own terms.
A prophet in a white coat, handing a country its diagnosis, whether it asked or not.
Link in the description. Okay, back to our villain. The villain. Because documentaries almost never get a good one. Real life doesn't cast for menace, and this film has a proper chills-down-the-spine antagonist. A history teacher at the same school named Pavel Abdomanov.
Another Pavel.
Another Pavel. And if Talankin is the film's conscience, Abdomanov is its dark mirror, the true believer to Talankin's quiet dissenter. And most of the movie's ideological charge comes off the current running between these two men.
And he is magnificent on screen. He looks and talks like a Hollywood heavy. The measured voice, the amused certainty, the way he can make a reasonable sentence sound faintly sinister. He honestly deserves an Oscar of his own.
There's the scene everyone remembers. He's asked which figures from the past he'd most like to meet, and he answers, without a flicker, Lavrenti Beria, Viktor Abakumov, and Pavel Sudoplatov.
the head of the NKVD, the head of SMERSH, and one of Stalin's most notorious operatives.
3 architects of the terror, reeled off like names on a guest list. And then, near the end, the payoff. The state, or so the editing strongly implies, rewards his loyalty with an apartment. And he's visibly moved on camera. I'm genuinely touched. Because sometimes it feels like they're ready to tear me apart.
And here's where I have to be the killjoy, because this is exactly my thing. You don't get to praise a documentary for its honesty and then look away when it plays fast and loose with a real, named, living person. And with Abdumanov, it does. Twice.
Make the case.
Take that apartment. The scene is built to land as, this is what the regime pays you for pushing its war. Except that's not what happened. I went and checked. The results were announced on the 28th of January, 2022, nearly a month before the invasion even started.
Before the war.
Before the war. And it wasn't the Kremlin handing out a reward for propaganda. It was a charity prize from the RMK Copper Company, decided by a public vote of the townspeople. And 43 people got apartments that round. Social workers, plant veterans, ordinary locals. The film just quietly reverses cause and effect.
Okay, that one I can't defend. And I won't. The chronology is a real manipulation. What about the Stalinists?
That one's subtler, so I'll be fair about it. It's cut to read as pure adoration. The man worships the butchers. And maybe. But notice he's a history teacher with an obvious fixation on the repression era. The person I'd most want to grill about how the machine actually worked is not the same sentence as my heroes.
That's a generous read.
I went digging on his own online teaching page and found, posted there with real pride, the graduation project of one of his 11th graders. And its verdict on the terror is flatly, unambiguously damning. You don't usually publish a student demolishing the thing you supposedly revere.
Now here's where I push back a little, because I don't want us to overcorrect into being his defense lawyers. He is not a nice man, Dina. He's in United Russia, the main pro-Kremlin party. He defends the war without breaking a sweat. He does the whole, if you don't like it, leave the country routine, and reaches for the standard cliches about the rotten West.
No, and I'd never claim he's a hero. But, and this is the but that matters to me, he's also plainly the most educated, most genuinely engaging teacher in that building. The one who taught with ideas instead of reading off a printout. And flattening him is an ethical choice, not just an editorial one.
And this is the honest split between us, I think. You see a real person shaved down into a villain, and it bothers you as a fairness problem. I look at the same footage and I think, he is a propagandist. The type is real. The film isn't inventing that. But I'll concede the specifics.
So we half agree, as usual.
As character work, he's a triumph. You could not write him better. As documentary, he's the exact point where the film's hunger for a clean story overrode its duty to a real man.
Great for the plot, bad for the genre.
Great for the plot, bad for the genre. Hold that thought, because it runs under the whole movie.
Which takes us to what didn't work. And you start with the Abdumanov apartment. Because it's the door into all of this. It's a tell. Once you've caught a documentary bending one fact to sharpen a story, you can't unsee the technique.
And the place it bugged me most is the kliukva.
Kliukva, for our English-speaking listeners, it literally means cranberry. As slang, it's the ridiculous cliches outsiders slap on to Russia. The word comes from some foreigner who supposedly bragged about resting in the shade of a spreading cranberry tree. Cranberries grow ankle-high.
Exactly. And the irony is, this film should be immune to it, shot from the inside by a local. Bears, balalaikas, unrelenting gray. The raw footage genuinely is immune. But the wrapper, the layer added in the edit for a Western audience, is full of them.
Such as? Give me an example.
It literally opens with a balalaika on the soundtrack.
which is exoticization in its purest form.
The narration reads like a literary English text performed in slightly stilted Russian, because that's basically what it is. There's a throwaway line that UNESCO named Karabash the dirtiest city on Earth, and at least one Russian fact-checker went looking and couldn't trace it to any actual UNESCO document.
So they gilded the misery.
And small historical howlers, like calling Beria the father of the Gulag, when the camps were running well before he took over in 1938.
And some montage sleight of hand.
Take that routine anti-cheating search before the national exam, reframed as a sinister security measure. These are the moves of a film that's already decided what Russia will mean to a festival audience.
And my second problem is the on-screen Talankin. And I need a big caveat first, because it would be so easy to misread me here. I'm talking strictly about the character the film constructs, not the man. In every interview he gives, the real Talankin is thoughtful, warm, self-aware, genuinely likable.
This matters. Say the rest.
But the version the edit builds is clumsier. There's a run of scenes whose entire job is to prove his anti-war credentials to the viewer. He hangs the white-blue-white protest flag in his office, tapes the windows into anti-war crosses, swaps the Russian anthem for Lady Gaga.
That all sounds fairly brave.
And the trouble is, several of these were, by their nature, filmed with nobody else in the room, which drains the danger out of them. It starts to read less like defiance than like defiance performed for the camera.
And there's the framing device that got me. The film's founding premise, that the war started and everything changed. As if the school was some ideology-free garden until February 2022. Come on. UNARMIA, the youth militarization movement, was founded in 2016.
6 years before the film's beginning.
The cult of Victory Day drilled into every school each May. The annexation of Crimea in 2014. The way the 2008 war with Georgia got taught. The machine the film presents itself as discovering had been bolting itself together for 15 years.
And squeezing all that into a tidy before and after does a quiet favor for the narrator. Because if the rot only set in 2022, then the man who kept working inside the system needs a lot less explaining. And those self-justifications are the one note in the whole movie that plays as faintly staged.
But, and we have to be as clear as we possibly can here,
none of this is us sitting in judgment on Pavel Talankin. People stay in jobs, in institutions, in countries, for 100 ordinary human reasons. What he eventually did took real nerve.
we are not in the business of telling anyone they should have quit sooner or risked more. That's a game for people who never had to make the choice.
We're reviewing a film. And on screen, that note of self-exculpation is one of the places where the film's otherwise real honesty wobbles.
So, where do we land? And I'll say the headline first. This is a strong, serious film. Genuinely good. And more than that, an important document of its moment. There is nothing else quite like it. The Machine, filmed from inside the machine, while the machine was still running.
And if anyone's listened this far, waiting for us to say it isn't worth watching, no. Watch it.
Watch it. But everything we've said funnels into one thing. It is unmistakably a film built for an international audience, made to travel, to Sundance, the BAFTAs, the Dolby Theater. And that reach was bought, at least partly, with the compromises we've been describing.
And those are exactly the choices that make it grip a viewer in Park City who's never once thought about Karabash. And exactly the choices that alienated a chunk of the Russian audience, the people best placed to catch a detail that's off. Some of the harshest criticism came not from Kremlin propagandists, but from anti-war, anti-Putin Russians.
And here's the quiet, slightly deflating point. For all the noise abroad, the film is barely watched inside Russia. Yes, it's officially banned, but the authorities seem oddly relaxed about it. It's been sitting in the Runet this whole time, viewable without so much as a VPN on one of the country's biggest platforms.
We won't say which.
And the view count there is, frankly, modest. A regime genuinely frightened of a piece of media does not leave it one click away on the national internet. It's a sensation in the West and a footnote at home.
One last wish, in passing. They're sitting on years of unused footage. A director's cut for Russia? Longer, plainer, less shaped into a story.
The audience that bristled at the festival version might meet that one halfway.
It might even be the film that matters most.
On which note, that's us. Two people who don't watch films having watched a film.
Enthusiastic amateurs. Possibly worse.
See you next time, when we take the machine apart properly.